Good evening, good up. Can't just take two, it's live. Good evening, everyone. This is Reading for Charity again. Today we are finally talking about A Prayer for Owen Meany. Finally. I'll do my little spiel like I always do. We're doing all this for charity. This is just a charity read from start to finish. It's 100 books in a year. We're raising money for the Archie Foundation, which is a great charity that raises money for sick kids in the northeast of Scotland, particularly helping them when they have to go into hospital, which is a terrifying experience for adults. It's a hideous experience for children, and anything that can make their lives better is a good thing. I've said that so many times now. It's like, just go away and watch one of the other ones, but I have to consider everything in isolation. This time round, Prayer for Owen Meany. This book has been a long time coming. Mostly because it's, 630 something pages in length, but thanks to the size of the tiny text, it's more like 1200 pages. It's been a long read to get done. It was an interesting book. There's so much actually kind of crammed into the 600 pages. It's kind of hard where to start. So the central kind of conceit of Owen Meany being small in stature but big in spirit, I suppose, is the best place to start. There's no real necessary reason, I suppose, for Owen Meany to be small or to have the strange voice, other than to provide a more memorable and interesting character. That certainly, it doesn't really serve anything to the plot. Even the elements such as, the reasons why he doesn't become a frontline soldier, or they're practicing of the shot, two things which could depend on Owen Meany's size, don't necessarily really, he could have just been short in stature rather than, childlike in stature. The kind of jumped into the middle. So the book itself is about the life and times of Owen Meany, who is a small person with a large, interesting voice, a peculiar voice, which in the book is written all in caps constantly. And apparently Owen writes in caps as well later on, who is very spiritual. As we kind of find out in the book, he believes himself to be of immaculate conception. He and this kind of trades back into his parents being sacrilegious, because he is so religious himself, and it's almost ideological, his religiosity, is that a word? Is now. And his friend John, who is raised by a fairly well-to-do family. He doesn't know who his father is because his mother never tells him, and it's the story of these two growing up, and then John, in what they call the present, which is 1987, the present in the book, recalling his present day alongside their growing up. And I don't want to add too many spoilers into the book. I've been trying not to add spoilers to any of these reviews. But the life Owen has is kind of indelibly linked to how I have to discuss this. So it's quite obvious early on that Owen Meany is convinced of his own. He knows the date of his own death, and having foreseen it during a play. And this, along with many other things, gives him this sort of invulnerable sense of confidence that he has over other people. They describe him as being small in stature but large in presence. And I think that's one of the most interesting things that John Irving kind of puts together in the book, is it's actually the view that confidence is far more important than looks and everything else. Charisma is almost universal where looks aren't. If you can be confident and act confident and expect people to follow, then they most likely will. And I think that's probably quite true. And the way Owen Meany kind of arranges his life, with the certainty of his fatality, and the certainty of his faith, and the certainty that the angel of death that he sees with John's mother, it's it provides an interesting kind of surety in the actions. You know, Owen is always confident. He's always, this is exactly how it should be. This is exactly what should happen. This is my view. My view is correct, and he has the intellect to back it up. Where many of the other characters in the book don't necessarily have the intellect to back up their arguments to Owen. So he kind of has that going for him. There's kind of a big chunk of the book that could have been pulled out. This could have been a 250-page book if they concentrated on the kind of the story that Irving was wanting to tell. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's probably not necessary. Like a lot of the school years of John and Owen are relatively pointless. Again, I keep using the word pointless. It's not really that. That's not fair on the authors. Is maybe not necessary for the telling of the story, but it's interesting regardless. I think I'm quite minimalist in how I want books to approach things. I think it's one of the reasons why I get so annoyed at series like the Wheel of Time and the Gunslinger series, that there's so much filler added in there. I find there's an interesting story to be told. I want the story to be told and then done and finished. And A Prayer for Owen Meany has a little bit of filler added in. Again, because Irving's created an interesting character in Owen Meany, so he's writing lots about him and using him as a foil to talk about other things, such as spirituality and war and fatality as well. I don't think it's accepted that the book talks a lot about nihilism and fatality, but it's definitely there. A lot of what Owen Meany does, I think, is driven by the fact that he's aware of his own impending death, and his actions, bear little upon that happening. I'm trying to remember the word for it. The opposite of free will, predetermination. That's the word I'm looking for. He believes his actions are predetermined, and that's quite a religious thing. There's plenty of religion that believes in predetermination, that your life is set out from the moment you're born, and certainly it appears that Owen Meany felt that. But that particular strand of it isn't really discussed particularly much. Certainly the religion versus atheism argument in Owen Meany, and the way that John becomes more religious thanks to Owen's wisdom, is that part is argued. The futility of war, and John escapes the draft and escapes to Canada, and despite never being a Canadian, he's always an American in exile. Is still vehemently anti-war, to the point where his pupils are able to get out of lessons basically by winding up asking him questions about US foreign policy and letting him go. So I'm fairly sure we did similar things when I was at school as well. If you could find out what a teacher was interested in, you could get them off topic pretty easily. But get myself off topic. There's plenty of kind of themes running through Owen Meany, and he's using Owen Meany as a character to talk about those themes. But a lot of it could have been pared back or split into two books, for example, talking about the life of Owen Meany. 600 pages of tiny writing makes it kind of a slog, especially the first half of the book. The first half of the book kind of really deals with the 50s as they get, and it's the death of John's mother and their life up to that point, and the school plays, the church plays, the church nativity, while showing Owen's development into the adult he becomes in the second half of the book. A lot of it is, again, almost filler for the second half of the book, which I think is the more important half. You could get rid of most of the first half and just have things like the school nativity play, his clashes with the headmaster. You could have written out most of the voice stuff and still had a fairly coherent idea of who and what Owen Meany was. So again, I think it's another book that's been cursed by being overly long because the author is very, very clever. which is which is a good thing and a bad thing. But let's fall on the good side bit. It took me too long to read it because it's too long. However, it's a good book. It is very clever, very, very clever, and it's worth reading slowly as well. I think that's part of the problem. So one of the things I've complained about in previous books is that it was particularly Stephen King. He spent an entire book shouting, "Look how clever I am!" Literally shaking the author. "Look how clever I am! I've done all these things before. I'm so clever. I foreshadowed this. I did that. I've written this book in a particular way. I've made all these references. How can you not see it, you stupid reader?" John Irving is completely the opposite side of that spectrum. He writes very, very cleverly. So in one section he's talking about Tess of the Durbert Girls and the to his class of pupils, and he talks about how the narrator is very snobbish in his attitude towards what goes on in the book, and of course, and then that leads into an argument against Reagan and how arrogant they are, and how Reagan etc. is much like the people in Tess of the Durbert Girls. However, there's another layer to that, which is John himself, through the book, is also very arrogant and very snobbish in many, many ways. So he's been clever in the way he links the things that John talks about to the people in his book, and he links it in interesting ways. So there's like single lines that link things together rather than mirrored instants. Rather than having the same incident happen in two books and then, or having identically named characters or very obvious means of linking, of making intertextual references, he's done it in kind of like a throwaway line in a section where John isn't showing the behaviour that he's commenting on, but he does elsewhere in the book. And when you think about it, you go, yes, actually I do see that connection. It's a very subtle set of writing, completely the opposite of Stephen King, who's brash and in your face, and John Irving is far more subtle. I know that you're supposed to admire the cleverness of his writing, and the cleverness of his prose, I should say, in the way that he writes some of his descriptions and writes some of the dialogue. I didn't find it so much. I think it's this kind of northeast US author thing that there doesn't seem to be any other authors. Either they're all from California or they're from the northeast coast of America. That just seems to be it. No one else in America writes, as far as I can tell, because those are the only two groups I ever see. And the language always ends up being relatively similar in the way they discuss things. Again, I think if you're born of the area, you live in the area, you're going to end up describing the area in similar ways. There's only so many ways you can describe, semi-rural suburbania in America. So that you end up with a lot of similarities. So I don't think the prose was quite maybe as clever, or the prose was quite as clever as maybe I'm supposed to believe it is. It's good. It's an enjoyable book, but and I didn't find it a chore to read. There was no part of the book I was going, oh come on man, just shut up and get on with it. It was just that there's a lot of book to read. That's the only reason it took so long. Again, this is the opposite of some of the other ones I've had to read. Things like, again, I feel like I'm picking on Stephen King, but some of those books really angered me. I'll pick on someone else. The Animal, the autobiography of the female body. That book angered me as well, and it was because the writing in that was terrible. It was awful, and the arguments that were made were just contradictory and inane and obviously refutable. And it was and it went on for too long, and you sat down and you picked up the book and you went, I have to read more of this. I'm contractually obliged to read more of this, and I don't want to. I never felt that with A Prayer for Owen Meany. I picked up going, this is an interesting book and I'm enjoying it. and I would read for an hour, and I would look at the book and go, I have made absolutely no impact on this book whatsoever. There's just as much left to read as when I picked this book up an hour ago. And that's mildly disheartening, but it was never the book, it was just the getting through it that was the issue. So yes, a solid Wodger book, a completely and totally solid Wodger book. So to sum up, because I've been ranting for 15 minutes already, A Prayer for Owen Meany. Is it a good book? Yes, it is. I really enjoyed the book. Should you read this book? It depends, I think. Most of the time I want to say, yes, you should read this book if I actively didn't dislike it. However, in this one, it almost feels like, and this is going to be sacrilegious to say, that you could watch the film and be fine with it. And I've never seen the film, but I know there is a couple of films of this book. It feels very cinematic in places. The character of Owen Meany, I think, is designed for screen as much as it's designed for books. The themes of the book might not come across so well in films, but the character of Owen Meany, I think, would work better in a film than it would in a book. That's probably quite contentious. So, if you were going to watch, and this is going to completely reverse what I just said. If you're going to go watch the film, though, I'd suggest reading the book first. So ignore everything I've just said. Read the book if you want to read the book. Yeah, it's worth reading. It is worth reading. But you can skim a lot, I think. Unless you're wanting to sit down and read this book for a long period of time, there's a lot of bits you can skim. Definitely. But it's a good book and it's worth reading. I enjoyed it very much. So next week will be Sunday, and Sunday will be, with any luck, Trump's autobiography, The Art of the Deal. Isn't it joyful? It's not actually within arm's reach. It's just over there. I forgot to bring it over to my desk. Yes, Trump, The Art of the Deal. Whether this is better or worse than Mein Kampf is yet to be seen, but that's the book I'm going to be comparing it to. So that'll be me banned from travelling to America anytime soon. Yes. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who's donated. If you've never donated to the Archery Foundation before, please go ahead. The links will be in the description of the video. I strongly urge you to. It's a really great charity to support. We've raised over £750 already. I really want to make this 1,000 by the time I get to book 100. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. I very much appreciate the donations. I will speak to you all again on Sunday. Good evening.